but we've got 22 people joining and there were quite a few more signed up, so I'll just give it another minute if that's okay.
Yeah, take your time, take your time. So I know Caroline's waiting to do her introduction, folks, but can I just ask that you switch your screens, your cameras on, so we can actually see who I'm talking to? That would be helpful. I recognise a few names. I can see lovely Jason Avery there from Hampshire. Welcome, Jason. Put your screen on. Hello, Brian. Finished your lunch, have you, mate? Graham, Dave, yeah, good, good. As long as the technology holds up, it would be far nicer for the assembled team too, please. It's better. Well done. Hello, Graham. Nice to see you. Looking well, mate. Dean, more Hampshire colleagues. Hampshire out in force, as always.
I think we'll make a start. We've got 26 on the call, but yes, good afternoon everyone and welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I do know quite a lot of you names popping up on the screen. I'm Caroline Clark, I'm your PA lead for OPSS for fire safety, and just usual housekeeping today. If you don't mind, if you're not speaking, can you keep on mute and your cameras off just because of the background noise. We are recording this session, so be mindful in the chat or discussions. It will be recorded and shared with delegates afterwards, but no wider than that. If your connection fails, I've put in the chat the dial-in details for you to phone in and join us. Please get involved. These can be quite painful and isolating, so use the raise your hand facility and pick up, and hopefully we'll be able to address those at the end. Other than that, we'll crack on. We've got 29 on the call now, so maybe a few more will join, but over to you, Mark, and thanks again for presenting today.
Thank you, Caroline, and good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. As Caroline said, it can be a fairly lonely and difficult place to be presenting or engaging in these kind of sessions, but I think given the environment we found ourselves in for the last 7 or 8 or 9 months even, that we've all become a little bit more familiar and comfortable about operating in this space. But I will straight away reinforce the point, please, about putting your cameras on. It's just a lot more engaging if we can see the collective colleagues that are actually on the call. So cameras on if you can, so long as the technology does sustain that. And I'd also urge, just to make it a worthwhile half an hour, that we do get as much engagement as possible. Like missed this whole last few months, the opportunity, and the fire and rescue sector are the best at it, in that lovely networking thing that we all enjoy. And ordinarily, of course, this would have been an event that we would have been in some lovely part of the country and been able to meet and greet. And often it's not these sessions and people like me talking that you get the best from. It is actually making the good connections and the good friends from around the services, and so that you can take discussions offline and create that network and seek advice. And that's frankly been, one of the most wonderful parts of the sector, and particularly this group in terms of primary authority, as we found our feet over the last few years and understood more about the role of primary authority. So please, on that point, engage. As I say, put your cameras on. Malcolm, your camera's still off. Put your cameras on and ask questions. There's a chat bar, so stick loads of questions in the chat bar to keep the engagement going, and put your hands up or just butt in and make a comment where necessary. I think this is a session that should be broadly familiar, or should be, I hope, broadly familiar with you, and so I'm hoping for plenty of engagement. If I don't get any, then I shall stop short of the full half an hour, and I shall use the last 5 or 7 or 8 minutes. That's better, Malcolm. Nice to see you. I shall use the last few minutes with a bit of a workshop, really, with a couple of questions I want to put to you, so that you've actually come along work and it's not for the first for the whole session. So Pinui is back. Enjoy the session. Enjoy the opportunity, I say, to use the chat bar and make some friends with those that you don't know. But let me just introduce myself formally first of all. So good afternoon, Mark Andrews, and I'm from West Sussex Fire and Rescue Service. And I'm also the National Fire Chiefs Lead on Business Engagement. And so it's my pleasure this afternoon to be invited by OPSS and BAYS to speak at this event. As I say, it's just a shame that we're not all together in the same space, but I'm sure we will make it work. I'm also joined by colleagues from East Sussex who are going to help me out in parts of the session. So I've got Becky there somewhere. Give us a wave, Becky. Hey, Becky's going to give us a bit of an introduction of a case study. And Andrew Gorsden, who you all know well, who's just going to give you a bit of input in terms of the specialised housing element of the session. And I think we've also got a colleague, hopefully, from Tyne and Weir, Dave Smith. If you're there, Dave, hello, who's going to talk a little bit also about his case study from his primary authority specialised housing relationship. So what are we here for? So we got 20-25 minutes now to talk about specialised housing and broadly the care sector and its relationship with primary authority. So for those that do know me, you will know that those are two areas that I'm particularly passionate and fond of in terms of fire and rescue. And frankly, I see them as two bits of work that will make a significant difference to the challenges that we have lying ahead. And that's a really good place to start, I think, in terms of context, just to understand the position we're in. And I've spoken a few times recently about the opportunity that fire safety has, or protection has, right here, right now. And I think these two subjects particularly, especially when you partner them up, are an opportunity for us to really punch above our weight in terms of the difference we make to risk, vulnerable people, efficiency and effectiveness, and improvement in the fire and rescue sector. So specialised housing in the care sector is something I've been working on for a number of years, and we'll cover that off in a minute. But certainly I absolutely feel that is an area where our integrated risk management plans, our IRMPs, should really be focused. And I'd be disappointed, frankly, if any of the risk management plans that you're all should be looking at and involved in and driving from a protection point of view don't have specialised housing as a cornerstone of where the risk lies. And there's a couple of reasons for that. As Andrew and I will talk about presently, in terms of the kind of risk and the vulnerability that you'll find within specialised housing, in terms of the behaviours, the age demographic and the kind of building construction element of that, it's a real mix of all of the challenges that we face. But what it also does, it provides an opportunity of a space where a lot of our business can come together to drive improvement. So protection, prevention and response should all be working in that same space. And we'll explain a little bit why in a moment. But how that links to this session around primary authority, of course, is the fantastic opportunity that it offers us to deliver all of that in terms of a partnership arrangement and an engagement with our customer. And our case studies a little bit later on in the session will really enforce why that offers us such benefit to be able to work in and around the regulation. So of course we deal with compliance, but the wonderful thing about primary authority is it allows us to add that strategic value where we can really support the business a bit better. Further context, of course, is important. And it's a bit clumsy to continue to talk about Grenfell when we all know exactly the implication that has. But just alongside Grenfell, there's been a number of other fires that we've had in the specialised housing sector that really has yet again warned at the issue that I've been speaking about for so many years in terms of an inherent risk within our communities of a really significant tragedy. Because these buildings are exactly the buildings where I think there is still the most risk. And whilst it's interesting, exciting, and frankly not before time that we are seeing some traction on regulation and legislation with the Building Safety Bill, the amendments to the Fire Safety Bill, and of course the consultation on the Fire Safety Order, some of that focus, of course, high-rise buildings, and rightly so. But what I want to make sure in this session, and through you as a conduit, you keep on banging the drum about where the real risk lies in terms of vulnerability, the behaviours of people, and where we get this specialised housing sector. And of course, that's not always going to be high-rise buildings. And there are a number of fires that we've experienced in the last couple of years that have absolutely cemented that risk. Beechmere up in Cumbria. Beechmere was an extra care premises with a really significant fire. A number of factors in terms of the behaviour of the building, which is another context in terms of extra care housing. And then more recently, although not specialised housing per se, a fire that Andrew and myself and colleagues in East Sussex attended in Pankhurst Avenue in Brighton, where we had a 3-storey residential medium-rise or low-rise block, whereby with any other set of circumstances, it would have been a really different and tragic outcome. But it just reinforced the fact that the high-rise is not always the high risk. So whilst it's exciting and encouraging seeing all this new regulation coming along, I want to really focus on the fact of where I still believe there is the greatest risk within our communities, and where, as I say, we can really bring together the benefits of protection, prevention and response. But just one final point in terms of the sort of wider context and that regulation that's coming over the hill, and that's just to point at the fact that all of the building safety bill, whilst there is a focus on the high rise, one of the other really good outcomes of the Dame Judith Hackett work, and is a key part of the building safety bill, is the focus on residents and a resident's voice. And I think through the primary authority partnerships and your influence as regulators through those care partnerships is the opportunity to really improve that relationship with the residents and the voice they have in terms of influencing change and understanding better what some of the risks are within that primary authority and that specialised housing space. Just quickly to see if there's any other points colleagues wanted to come in on in terms of on those new pieces of legislation coming over the hill and any particular aspects that might be concerning them or of an issue, but in the primary authority space. And what I'm going to do later in the session is just refer back to the building risk review and the relationship I think that has with primary authority partnerships, and where I think those two bits of work can work together. So I've got a hand up, so you're gonna have to shout because I can't see whose hand that actually is.
It's me, Jason. Mark.
Hey Jason, yeah, go mate.
Hi. Firstly, the white shirt suits you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's aging me slightly, if I'm honest, but I'll take I'll take the comment.
I'm sure you're settling nicely into the new job. I think really for me, one of the current kind of dilemmas for us around regulation of these kind of premises is around the frailty and vulnerability of the occupants, given COVID being a health factor, if you like, for us. And we've recently seen a fire in Hampshire in the last couple where there's been an instance in this kind of property. And so for me, the challenge is how do we help regulate these buildings to be as safe as they possibly can, given the nature of the occupants, whilst not going in and introducing a greater risk from the potential transfer of a virus into that community, which we've known historically. Well, I say historically, we've known since the beginning of COVID that these are the places where the greatest mortality seems to be. So you're trying to balance one risk up against a completely different one, if you like, one from a health perspective and one from a fire safety perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Jason, and we're all sort of all trying to vex in with that challenge. But I think that the message I've been giving, and I think it reinforces an NFCC protects and message about how we do our business at this time, is to make sure that we do conduct that kind of best foot forward in terms of making sure that, and again, this forum, the primary authority is a perfect example of where we need to, open up that channel of communication. And Becky is a really good example of that in East Sussex, in that she's really focused in on how she communicates and shares information. And frankly, you could be forgiven as a provider at the moment for focusing on all things COVID, and that's when the greatest risk in terms of forgetting the basics in fire safety can happen. So I think it's just really keeping that simple messaging going to ensure that those buildings or those risk assessments remain on message. But really good point, Jason. I think we'll revisit that a bit later in the session. So if we just move on then, just to get our context in terms of specialised housing, I hope with the assembled great and the good I have on this call, certainly my colleagues in London will be well informed in terms of specialised housing, and I hope all colleagues around the country. But just to remind ourselves in terms of the work, the background, specialised housing is the work was really just to try and improve exactly what primary authority should do, and that is drive consistency and proportionality. Those are two of the biggest ticket items behind the guide. Now, it's a complex, long 400-page guide that we're not going to do justice to clearly on a 30-minute call. But if you don't know the guide well, you should do, at least in terms of the appendix and the way that the guide offers a really balanced approach to fire safety and focuses in on that person-centered approach. So that's the first message, and we'll come to some tools in a minute. But the second point is understanding what it is, because fire safety officers over the years have been confronted by a real shift in the landscape of how care is provided. And as care has been delegated down from central government down to local government in terms of adult social care, the offer and the mix of specialised or care housing is absolutely confusing and complex. Even the frankly have lost track of some of the definitions and meanings. And so goodness, how are our inspecting officers, how are our fighting front lines supposed to determine what the type of building they're going into is, let alone determine a consistent guidance and way to resolve the fire safety arrangements? And so that's what the Specialised Housing Fire Safety Guide tries to do, is it tries to provide a consistent and proportionate approach to do that. We've also looked much more widely, so you'll find definitions of specialised housing in, for example, Treble 9.1, and I hope that in the review of the building regulations, you'll also see, because it's been a really important part of the consultation, specialised housing get its own reference point, so that the shift around the understanding of it is much more broad now. But in a nutshell, if we think of the general needs or mainstream housing as one sector, and on the other end of the spectrum, we think of the regulated or care home as the other end of the spectrum, and as two sections. Effectively, specialised housing is everything in between those two things. So it's not a care home where there's the CQC regulate, and it's not mainstream general needs. It's everything in between, and hopefully that gives our inspecting officers and our frontline fire crews a really good grasp of, okay, that's what that building is. If it doesn't fit into those two categories, it's very likely to be specialised housing, therefore the guide is likely to apply. And although it's not Article 50 guidance, it's pretty much best practice guidance, and your customers in terms of the care primary authority providers would be well minded to follow its guidance. So in terms of the guide, we've been very clear in there about trying to support a person-centered approach and recognising that the vulnerability, the behaviours and age are the key risk factors. And the fact that we've got, nearly 1 million residents that reside in specialised housing, that reinforces my point about the relationship between this work, primary authority, and our integrated risk management plans. So these sessions are really good to make sure that, from my point of view, the outcome is 3 or 4 key takeaways. So takeaway 1, does this relate to your current or proposed RMP? And if not, it jolly well should do. So please take that as a note. Moving us on in terms of a bit more detail into the guide, Andrew, I was just hoping you might cover off a couple of the key sort of sections of the guide and where you feel, as a sort of technical advisor, you feel it offers the best counsel for colleagues who might consider using it.
So the first thing is, Mark, thank you very much for the introduction, is don't be scared by the size of the guide at 350 odd pages, that it is deliberately in places repetitive read each section, and it's a standalone section. So because of that, whilst it might be 350 pages, you can pick up a section and work your way through in any one of the sections and treat it as an individual element. And you know, as Mark's articulated, what we found is you can have a premises that meets all the fire safety standards, yet we're still suffering significant injuries and deaths in these properties. And why? And that's where this guide takes you the next step beyond your regulatory fire safety. It looks at this person and how this person can be safe in their own home, and everybody should be safe in their own home, but it just takes you on that next stage around looking at the individual and goes that bit further. And you know, and there's a couple of critical elements in there. And you know, fire protection systems, sprinklers, mist systems are absolutely key, we've discovered, within these premises. But there's a more fundamental change around the level of detection, taking it up from your standard LD3 system right up to LD1. So there's a detector in each room, because what we're finding is people were getting involved in fire, and therefore you needed this very, very early level of detection. And then where you've got specific vulnerabilities, then you can go one step further to personal protection system tailored to the individual. But the principles of this guide can be taken beyond specialised care, because it is about the person, and therefore you shouldn't just use this guide for the main groups of property, which are your supported living, sheltered housing and extra care, but you can apply these principles to general needs housing as well. It's the principles are about bringing the person front and centre, and the risks and hazards they face as an individual, and how we as regulators can help provide a safe environment through education and engagement with those people that manage the properties. And that's the key link for me with primary authority and the work Becky has done around engagement with these groups, and we've particularly targeted that. But coming back to the question around how do we do this in COVID, and we've got to do things differently, and we're just getting to a stage where we're going to launch some initiatives around this and on online platforms, so we can engage with the managers at a time that suits them. And you know, and as a regulator, we've got to be flexible now around the times of the day we deliver, whether it's early morning, you know, late evening. We've got to be more flexible to the businesses we work with. I don't want to get too bogged down in the technicalities of it. I think it's better now, Mark, to pass over to the case studies of how this works.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew, and really good input. And I think there's a couple of really sage points that you made in there. Firstly, about the flexibility, and then really helpfully reinforcing that person-centered approach. And then the other point you made, which is often, particularly as a new inspecting officer, and for some colleagues coming to the guide for the first time, you know, not to be overwhelmed. Because it really has been designed with you, the reader, in mind, in that it is a really easy, ready reckoner. And if you want to know about mobility scooters, if you want to know about sprinklers, if you want to know some helpful facts and figures, you know, it's a good guide to go to. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute with the tools and support that we've designed in and around the document that you may not have picked up. So in summary, then, the document helps us because it is a complex landscape. You've got the Care Act. You've got the Housing Act, of course, and the fire safety legislation, all fighting for the same space. And it's sometimes difficult to navigate your way through. And clearly, we've got new legislation coming over the hill. But the important point here is the customer has to win. It has to be about those vulnerable people. And that's where you design that risk assessment back from, is a point we're going to consistently and keep on making. And that helps cut through that regulation if you focus on a vulnerable person. And it also reinforces exactly what we're here to reinforce this afternoon in terms of partnerships count. You need to make your relationships in and around the care providers, in and around the landlord, in and around the local authorities and the commissioners, because those are key colleagues that help you come up with the right balanced fire safety solution for these types of premises. So more almost than any other type of business you're involved in, collaboration and partnership is really effective. And that's why primary authority in this case helps with that consistency, because of course, make your partnerships, make and then they work all the way through the whole portfolio that your landlord colleagues will have. The rest of those points really speak for themselves, but I'll take Andrew's nod to move on to the case study. So I think that really brings to life exactly what we've spoken about here. So in a second, I'm just going to introduce Becky just to give her a 2-minute warning. But before I do that, again, to make these sessions worthwhile and to feel like you've had some real value from the time you spent with us this afternoon, I just wanted to go through the resources that we've provided for you to help you in interpret the guide and maybe work with your customers or your prime authority partners in terms of how to use the guide and how to reduce risk in specialised housing. So Khadija, could you please bring up and share with colleagues the high risk accommodation page? Now, whilst Khadija does that, team, if you look in the chat bar, Andrew Gosden has really helpfully just given the link, or I think he has given the link to the higher risk accommodation page. So what we're looking for here is not that page, is the higher risk accommodation page. So Andrew's put a link in the chat bar. So what we want is higher risk accommodation, please, in the search there, Khadija. But while Khadija finds that for us, colleagues, what you'll find is when you go to that link, and perhaps one of the benefits and beauties of sitting on a session like this is you can do this while we're speaking. If you go onto your laptops and put in the search bar higher risk accommodation, specialised housing, then you will, yeah, that's the link. Click on that. You will get to the page that we're just about to present to you. And on that page, you'll see firstly a link to the specialised housing guide. And secondly, the point I really wanted to draw colleagues' attention to is a link to all of the resources that we provide. You're struggling a bit there, Khadija. So it's not the lead officers, it's the high risk accommodation page. So stand by, Khadija, don't worry, I'll talk at it rather than confusing colleagues with the wrong page. What I would just ask is that you go on to the link that Andrew provided, because that's the correct one. And let me just bring it up myself so I can navigate you to the right place. What you've got at the bottom of the page is a link to a whole range of resources that help you if you want to workshop or if you want to come up with some case studies. They have all been provided for you so that you can do some training sessions or some learning outcomes using the guide itself with colleagues. And secondly, and this is a really good takeaway, is further down you'll see a link to fire safety in the home, an e-learning session. And that link takes you directly to the TSA, or the Telecare Services Association website. And on there is a further link to fire safety in the home. And that gives a short 20-minute e-learning, a really good e-learning package that is provided for all those that work in and around specialised housing to help them discharge their responsibilities under the Care Act, and more importantly, under their care certificate, which all of them should be working towards or have, which prescribes them having an understanding of fire safety. And where that's such a benefit to you is if you're trying to, that's it, you've got there, thank you, Khadija. What you're trying to do, of course, is to raise the awareness of all of the folk that work in and around specialised housing. So by following that course, that will raise the understanding and help people do the basic hazard spotting. And Jason asked a really cute question about how do we do this during COVID? Well, of course, the business of care still needs to be ongoing whilst we within those premises. So those are our eyes and our ears every day of the week. And by following that simple online course, that will really raise their knowledge and awareness. So it's a really good tool that I would encourage you all to share with your primary authority partners and indeed your other colleagues. Okay, so that hopefully is helpful. The link's in the chat bar. I'm just going to move the presentation on to Becky to give us her insight and her experience briefly on working with a care provider, in this case, Ambient. Becky Bartlett, over to you.
Lovely, thank you, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. So yeah, I'm just going to talk to you about Ambient Support, which is one of the partnerships that East Sussex Fire and Rescue have. We've been in partnership with them since April this year, so it's quite soon, but we have quite a lot of involvement with them. We've actually taken this over from Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue Service, so we're trying to follow on with the fantastic work that they've already done with them previously. So Ambient Support are a registered UK charity providing care and support to elderly people, those with mental health needs and people with learning disabilities. Excuse me. So as Andrew spoke about earlier with the specialised housing guide, these all categories of people all actually fall into this guidance. So we do speak about this guide quite a lot and have quite in-depth conversation, which is that it's out there. So they provide the care for different premises, but they also work alongside quite a few other housing associations, which can sometimes be quite confusing with regards to responsibilities of different areas of fire safety. One of the associations is called Riverside, who have a primary authority partnership with London Fire Brigade. And as part of the partnership, we've been working in partnership with them and ourselves with regards to fire safety and trying to get the premises up to a safe standard, obviously for all the residents and staff within that area. So it's a really good way of working in partnership, not just with the primary authority, but with other fire and rescue services at the same time. So when we're currently supporting them on creating a responsibilities matrix to help them, so both sides can really understand who is responsible for certain areas of fire safety and how we go about actually getting things done and getting things safe. So as you can imagine, with regards to COVID recently, we have come across quite a lot of fire safety issues and supported Ambience on them. So just going to give you a few examples of those just to give you a taste of what we've been doing. So we've given guidance with regards to external temporary structures for care homes. I don't know if anybody else has come across this new thing that's come around. So this was to be used for residents and visitors, so they didn't have to actually enter the premises. So under the obviously the government guidelines, but they could still see their loved ones, but using like an external of meeting outside. So we supported them with regards to how this is going to impact their fire safety, what extra measures they need to put in place, and any of their policies that they need to review or update going forward. We also gave information and guidance on the safe storage of hand sanitisers. So whereby they had obviously an over provision in the given circumstances. And as you can imagine, like care and specialised housing premises, hand sanitizer brought in large quantities and not necessarily having the right space to store them and not quite sure what to do with them with regards to fire safety. So we gave them tips and advice on how to store them, what's the best location to store them, and any other information that come up with that. So obviously not having them in the means of escape and obviously having them in proper containers external to the building, etc. If that was doable at the time. Another one, again, we've actually picked this up in quite a few different premises, not just care, but we gave quite a lot of advice with regard to dangers of fire doors being wedged open. So they wanted the doors to be open to obviously cut down on people touching door handles because of COVID and to restrict obviously anything being spread to anybody, visitors and residents within the buildings. So we'd advised on fire doors obviously shouldn't be wedged open and installing, obviously if they can, automatic self-closing devices on doors that are being used all the time, constantly throughout the day, or if acoustically hold open devices were appropriate under obviously the British standard conditions. So one other area which was trying to make the homes more homely, because obviously they weren't seeing a lot of people coming into the care homes, etc. They wanted to introduce vinyl pictures on walls and fake hedges and hanging baskets to make it a bit more of a nicer environment for them. But obviously, once we looked into what these products they were using and the flammability ratings on the specifications, we could easily see that they were combustible materials and which were wanted to be put on the means of escape. So we gave them a lot of advice on where they could and couldn't use them. With regards to vinyl wraps, they were actually okay after looking at data and test records, but obviously, unfortunately, the hedges and hanging baskets had to go. So bearer of bad news, but unfortunately they had to have something different to be used in these areas. But at least we can just go to one person and then this can be cascaded throughout all the premises to all, obviously all the managers, etc. There is another example on here with his places for people with Tyne Weir Fire and Rescue Service, which Mark, I understands. Was it Dave Smith, one of the colleagues?
Dave Smith, that's right. So Becky, thank you. That's a really practical and realistic kind of example of where we've made an absolute difference. And I know Ambient and their colleagues are hugely grateful to the work that Becky's done. And it really answering Jason's question, it's kept them safe in the most unusual circumstance. And it reinforces why Primary Authorities just really gives that single point of contact, that go-to person. And let's be honest with ourselves, as regulators, we're perhaps hard to access. And so it's one of the key benefits to Primary Authority in that we can do that relationship. So great work, Becky. Dave, if you're on the call and you can hear, it'd be great to hear from you about your experience with places for people up there in the northeast. Dave, are you there?
Hi, Mark. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Dave.
Yeah, Places for People, they're quite a large housing provider with such a diverse portfolio that we literally cover everything from specialised general needs to residential care and some mental health properties as well, which has thrown up a few issues in terms of how we can address their fire safety provisions. Largely reactive, our work has been. It's on-site visits, as I imagine for everybody, they dried up overnight. We have been addressing issues that we have not quite all the information for. So we're looking at plans, we're looking at policies, and we've addressed those issues as best we can. Place for People, they are a parent group and they've got over 20 subsidiary companies, and I think that over the COVID from lockdown 1, I've seen more of them than I had previously, and I'm becoming more aware of them. Also as time goes on, particularly with the building risk review underway and the challenges that is throwing up. Places for People, again, I think similar things to what Becky's already mentioned. We had to address issues with what do you call them, COVID control measures.
Risk assessments.
Yeah, risk assessments, control measures, because they were the people that were writing these control measures or risk assessments were prioritising COVID over fire safety, and sometimes that was okay, but there was other times when it wasn't. And we only became aware of that really when we had other fire and rescue authorities contacting us with threats of enforcement. There was a misunderstanding a lot of the time, and it was addressed quite quickly. Place for People, again, after sing the praises because they are very proactive. They are most of the time they are ahead of the game in terms of what's required following Hackett and the building risk review. They are again very proactive. To that end, what we have done since COVID is we've managed to set up a similar primary authority working group, all housing providers. That includes some of the subsidiary companies from Places for People, Home Group, quite a large national one, and one that's local to the northeast, and that's called Your Homes Newcastle. And they've all been bouncing off each other, talking through what they are doing for the various things, the emergency wall surveys, and there's been some very, very good ideas come through to the point where, I mean, for example, waking watches are a big thing at the moment. They are very expensive to run. They are limited in their ability to detect fires and so on. And somebody said, well, why can't we have a video system with sound? So, I mean, that would be literally a video on each floor with microphones. You literally could have a waking watch in one part of that building, monitoring all the screens, listening to sound. Would that give earlier warning? It may well do if that person's awake and everything's effective. It's just an idea that came from our collaborative group meetings. They're carrying on. It really does work well. It's very informal, and I generally start the session with fire safety issues I've developed with other partners as well, because I think the building risk review isn't just affecting housing providers. It's also affecting companies like Sainsbury's, National Health Service, and community health partnerships. Again, they are healthcare providers. it's affecting all those people, because at some point they have got a building that is 18 metres, or the new one which may well be 11 metres high. So that is it really. Place for People, again, they are a good forward-thinking company. They are part of a local working group, local as in terms of the services that they provide, and we are quite proud of their involvement and pleased to sing their praises.
Thanks, Dave. So both for two ends of the country, two slightly different relationships, but both really good examples of where during really tough and difficult times, Primary Authority has really shown where fire safety and regulator and a business can really help each other out. Because of course, what Dave and Becky benefit from is that understanding that from a compliance perspective, they get that lovely reassurance that their risks are being mitigated, and they've got good confidence in the management structures and procedures that really address some of the concerns that Jason talked about earlier in terms of how do you know? Well, of course, if you build those relationships up, then you can have some reassurance that through the partnership those risk mitigation measures are being carried out. And again, what's lovely about Primary Authority is as regulators, we increasingly find that we're up against it in terms of resources, and we can't get out and inspect every single premises. And so things like, being able to have a narrative and a discussion about the things that Becky talked about in terms of pictures and visuals on walls and getting into some of that detail is just not the sort of work that our frontline inspecting officers are likely to be able to get involved in. So it really does reinforce that the partnership is more than just about compliance and regulation. I just want to pause there because I've really enjoyed those two, albeit brief, sessions in terms of the case studies, and just wonder if there's any other questions that we wanted to ask either Dave or Becky. Alan, you've got your hand up, so over to you, Alan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear. Thanks, Alan.
I know you probably can't see me, unfortunately, because of the technology.
That'll one.
Yeah, all that. I haven't done my hair today. That's really what it is.
Go on. What's your question?
I'm not sure how much of a question it is, but I've got a couple of primary authorities that I deal with that provide specialist care, build housing. So they build the premises and they put out the tender to the care commissioner, who then appoint a care provider to house people. The biggest safety issue I've come across, unfortunately, is the fact that the care providers don't seem to get the person-centered approach. In terms of they may get a resident that has really specialised needs, and their approach is, well, we can't deal with this in an emergency, so we're going to shut the door on them and walk away and leave them and wait for the fire service to return. And they really don't get that that's not acceptable. I wondered if anybody else had been dealing with those issues as well.
Well, whilst I hope someone will join, and answer back, because there's lots I could say about that. But frankly, a care provider who isn't taking a person-centered approach is entirely incongruous. So that's disappointing to hear. But we all face these kind of challenges. But clearly, again, I would put the document, the specialised housing guide, under their nose and remind them of their responsibilities under the Health and Care Act, of course. But I appreciate this is about relationship and partnership building, so you can't be too directive. But evidently, particularly in the current climate and some of the context I outlined at the beginning of the session, with the responsibility to have very coherent fire safety evacuation strategies and the whole debate around stay put versus horizontal evacuation versus full evacuation. That's exactly where a care provider in relationship with in partnership with their landlord should be you're thinking about. So that's disappointing on one level to hear, but Dave, you've got a response.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, and Alan, thank you for the question. And it is something that we come across daily, to be honest with you. It's frustrating from my point of view, but as Mark has said, we literally stick to the guides, and we try and push our weight around a little bit sometimes. Care providers themselves are their own worst enemies. Is that the correct phrase I'm thinking of? I don't think they appreciate what they're doing, and their lack of person-centered approach, it revolves around a peeps that generally says we'll leave them in the room until the fire service come and rescue them, and that isn't good enough.
No.
We get buildings that are built to one standard. Am I cynical? I probably am. And then they put different purpose groups into those buildings, and they try and address the situation after that. And we are constantly dealing with, certainly in the northeast, housing providers or care providers that are doing this, even to the point where some builders are building premises to a lower standard for a different purpose group, and they are deliberately, in my opinion, putting people in there that aren't suitable, that cannot evacuate. There isn't the services there to evacuate them. So it is something that is, I think, very common throughout the country. And as Mark said, the only thing we can do really is work with people and push that guide, or whatever it is.
Thanks, Dave. I've got a lot of contributors, which is fantastic. So, Dean from Hampshire, nice to hear from you, Dean. What did you want to say?
If I can unmute, I'll be all right.
Go on, Dean.
So I'll just lip read. I'll keep going.
No, Dean, sorry, mate. You are still mute, so you're double clicking, mate.
Yeah, I've clicked once. It should be okay.
That's it. You're all good. Go.
Yeah, taking it back to the person-centered approach. Certainly from our experience, I don't think it's necessarily a case that that they don't take a person-centered approach. I think they're not quite sure how far they need to go. So from our perspective, I think it's, as a primary authority, it's our job to lead them in the right direction, to actually make sure they understand what the end result is, what they're trying to achieve, and therefore they put the attention where it should be put, not just the fact that we got to them that looks after somebody that's immobile, for example. So if we close the door, it'll be fine. What they don't realise is that that's not sufficient, and that's the education piece. And I think that's what primary authority gives the best use of, is being able to educate them in the direction they need to go, so that they understand how far they need to go, not just what they need to do.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic, Dean. I think that you can put your hand down. I think that it really is a fantastic landscape and really does demonstrate primary authority at its best, because there's no doubt about it. A, there's lots of partners involved, and B, it is a fairly complex area to navigate through the guide and through all of the person-centered approach and the relationship between the fire risk assessment, the building risk assessment, and the peeps and the person. And as you say, Dean, quite rightly, the guide, the primary authority, allows you time to have that more strategic approach. That was a really good contribution. So hopefully, Dave, that sort of answered a couple of your hope answered your question. Let me just, is there any other questions? No, it doesn't look like it. There's some really good chat in the chat bar. So have a little flick through some of that if you would. What I just want to do is finish off the session. I'm just going to pause and see if I get a thumbs up or down from Caroline if I've got 3 or 4 more minutes.
You have for me, but if anyone else needs to leave, we understand. But yeah, carry on.
Well, we should have realised, but you put a bunch of fire safety officers in even in a virtual room, then they will talk and talk and talk. So just we go to our last slide, Cage, and the last but one, really, we were just trying in that slide just to reinforce the benefits of primary authority. And I think, as a sort of final message really to this group, and we've only had a short time, but another takeaway, I think we're on our 3rd one now, is I think half the room is the preaching to the converted. So I don't need to reinforce this, but I'm mindful of colleagues out there listening into this call that may be either unsure about primary authority, or unsure in terms of they've got it, but they're not sure why they've got it, or perhaps haven't got it. In my case, in West Sussex, we haven't got primary authority, but I'm here to say I'm absolutely convinced that really is the way forward in terms of balancing risk versus resource for a fire and rescue service. We've had fantastic success in London and East Sussex, where I've worked before. It is about getting the right people in the role to deliver the partnerships. And if Dave and Becky have just wonderfully articulated, if you get that right, then you really can flourish in terms of relationship. And what you can do is make big inroads, in my opinion, into the RBIP and protect resources from other colleagues that are clearly tasked with that wider risk and resource delivery. Just a couple of sort of final points I wanted to make, if I could, please, team, just sort of in summarising, and I'll happily take your questions in a moment. But what we're interested in is at the back of this session is determining whether or not there really would be the interest in a working group. I know Dave up in the Northeast successfully run a group who focus in on housing, social landlords, and bring them together in a forum, as we did in London when I was there, to create that discussion and dialogue where that you help each other, because we're all in it together. So I wondered if there was an appetite to broaden that out and have a national sort of working group through Primary Authority that we could support and host, probably on a forum like this. So take comments on that. Do you think there would be benefit in that national working group for housing providers through Primary Authority? Discuss.
I am happy to facilitate that group as well and set you off. I've attended the Tyne and Wear meeting and I do think it's really beneficial. So if it's something you want to roll out, I will help support that from an OPSS point of view.
Okay, good. So okay, good. So we'll take comments on that, but certainly Caroline and I will be working back with you all to consider whether or not you feel there's some utility in that, and certainly Dave will be picking your brains for the success you've had in the Northeast. And then just one final point I think I wanted to just run through for a couple of minutes and perhaps warm Andrew up for a comment is the relationship between Primary Authority and the Building Risk Review. I feel that's a really fertile piece of work that, again, Primary Authority would have a good grip on. And although it's slightly out with specialised housing, probably, I definitely think there's a relationship. And I wonder, Andrew, if you had a view on how you think the two can work hand in glove.
So cheers for that, Mark, and cheers for the 30 seconds to think about it. But I've had this conversation with Caroline and actually started to draft a document that I'm going to share with Caroline shortly, and definitely by the end of the week, that I think there's some real benefits because we've already got these relationships with a lot of our partners which who have got these buildings, and therefore if we can, whilst every service is working individually, a lot of these partners, I've been talking to Hyde Housing and a number of other groups recently that have got buildings across the whole country, and how we can give them the single points of contact and consistent advice. But even with the BRR, we are finding inconsistencies between services in the approach and the application. I think Primary Authority, why wouldn't we already use those relationships in place to ease the pain on both sides?
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Really helpful, and I think certainly reinforce all of that. And I think it's an absolute opportunity for Primary Authority to flex its muscles in what will be a difficult and challenging year to get the BRR home. So there's a question on there from, so thank you, Michelle, for your support from London. Always great to hear from my London colleagues. And a question on there from Jason about the relationship between PAS, the publicly available standard, and Primary Authority. So perhaps Jason will give you an opportunity to air the question.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And it's just a quick one. It's just occurred to me that within the sort of NFCC world, we've got the fire standards being written at the moment, and it just occurred to me that I'm sitting on the Protection Fire Standards group, which is a full spectrum across the country of representatives there, and the draft is being worked on at the moment. That's the grandparent document, I think they're calling it, and then there's sort of the further detail that sits beneath that is being worked on in the next phase, and PAS has been highlighted as one area to look at. So what does a good standard look like for an organisation that deals with in a Primary Authority scheme? And I've volunteered to help contribute to that. So I'm just curious to what your views are about how do we take the knowledge from this group into that conduit to make sure that what the final version is well shaped.
Well, I think again, take other people's opinion, Jason, but I think with the onset of the new regulation and new legislation, it's fairly directive, particularly on the Building Safety Bill, that we can expect codes of practice and a refresh of particularly the CLG guides and all that is besides. Now, given the effort and the level of quality we put into drafting this particular piece of work, in terms of specialised housing guidance, I think that will be back of the queue to be refreshed, because I think it's still very much on point. But in terms of the publicly available standard, I don't know if other colleagues have got a view. We'll invite Andrew in for a comment.
Sorry, just trying to find the unmute mark. Yeah, publicly available standards are or can be a quick fix, because it's you can get them out there quicker than the full British standards and everything else. So I think, especially in this fast moving arena that we live in at the moment, and the changes to standards and guidance, PAS is a really good way forward.
Yeah, so I think the word that's probably caused a bit of confusion here is the word standard. So there is a standard for the work that's conducted through PAS, as in, you know, the regulatory standard. The fire sector standards that are being written are something different, and what they are is a framework by which, principally, I see the HMI CFRS using it as to judge us against that standard. So I want to just leave it here, Mark, is that as that first draft comes out probably won't be until the spring for PAS, if this could be a forum that I could share that with, so people could just see it. And it's not trying to rewrite the standard that is being applied by the PAS work, it's the central standard that's been written. It might be useful if I share perhaps the draft protection one, so people could see what it looks like. Yeah, most welcome. Run up to that.
And I think as an outcome, what Caroline and I will certainly want to do, and to make sure there is a legacy from this session, is we will try and work up that forum. There's already a prime authority network, Jason. But if we commit to trying doing that through a social landlord as well, so we engage with the sector as well as regulators, then I think that will be a perfect environment for you to share your thoughts and the PAS for comment and view. So absolutely happy to take that away.
Okay, maybe I'll pick up a conversation with Caroline, because there's some feedback that's being requested at the moment around stakeholders, and I'm sure that Caroline will be able to spot them a lot quicker than I will, and we've got to return that by the end of the month. So I'll drop you a note, Caroline, and we'll pick it up if you like.
Yeah, definitely. Just drop me an email. I know we've run slightly over, but I didn't want to stop any of the conversations, which is great, and everyone's been really involved, and there's lots of comments on the chat and questions on the chat, which I'll follow up individually with some of you. There's a couple of comments on the chat about why fire and rescue services are pulling away from Primary Authority and the Building Risk Review. I've had quite a lot of contact from different services. I've spoken to many of you about this. Any support I can give in communicating Primary Authority and its value within your service, please just let me know, and I will help where I can. Talk to a number of different services. Some services have contacted me to say they're having to suspend Primary Authority because the expertise and experience that's required for the Building Risk Review is the same as the experienced officers that are required for Primary Authority. I've had a number of contacts from businesses directly. One came through the NFCC last week, a care provider who's looking for a Primary Authority. If there's another forum for me to communicate with all rescue services in relation to that, please let me know, rather than just workplace. But as anyone that I've dealt with over the past few months knows, or past couple of years, any support for Primary Authority, please just let me know from a fire safety perspective, and I will help you where I can. And I'll be in touch about developing a similar group to this. There's obviously a need for discussion and sharing best practice, so happy to support.
Thanks, Caroline. And if I can just close by saying welcome all that comment. And I think Caroline and I, as the NFCC lead on this, will make it our business to get out and about, and clearly in better times come and visit those services who are perhaps still uncertain, and provide that support where we will. Again, I think as an outcome of this, there's still some questions hanging. So what Caroline, I know, is proposing, and in fact is in train, is we will have a brand new NFCC web page, similar to the high risk accommodation, hopefully in its utility, so that we will be able to put on there up-to-date information and use it as a really healthy, vibrant portal, he says. So that you can we can put information, put links, and perhaps that's where we'll host the aforementioned social landlords forum as well. And so that it again becomes a bit more visible to you all, and we can encourage and drive that partnership, or rather that sort of team approach, which I think is going to be helpful. It is really crucial that we don't lose the traction around primary authority in the context of all that's going on with BRR and the new regulation, because they do absolutely work hand in glove. So you'll see more promotion about that coming shortly. And as I say, Caroline and I will set up a forum. I think this session, actually, after having a little bit of anxiety about how it might work, I think it's been really good, really good contribution. And actually, we probably do ourselves a favour by picking any one of those questions that have come up in the chat bar and then revisiting this forum on a more regular basis, to allow a more relaxed environment where we can just chat through some of those questions. And I recognise perhaps I've not done justice to a couple of questions that have been asked on here simply because of time. But actually, this forum, much as we might find ourselves in a difficult time with COVID, this online forum is actually worked really, really well. So I think that could be something, again, that we could drive through that website and have regular check-ins, regular workshops, masterclasses, etc. But listen, I really must close the session. It's 2 o'clock. That's an hour. So we've gone well over. But as Caroline recognised, I think it's been a really healthy, positive discussion. So let me, as I should do, just finish with a few thank yous. Becky, contribution from me, Sussex, and Andrew, well done on specialised housing, and Dave, thanks for stepping in, bless you, from a Tyne and Wear perspective, and I look forward to working with you to roll out that social housing landlord partnership approach. That's really good. Thanks for the questions from the rest of you, all been really helpful and a really healthy session. But I'll just close by thanking Khadija for her forbearance with the controls, and lastly Caroline. You really are just a force to tour in terms of pushing forward all of this work. And as you said yourself, if any colleagues do need support or help, then you really are excellent in terms of driving that primary authority and a lot of heavy lifting and hard work. And certainly in East Sussex, we've got a lot of we've got a long way with your help and assistance. So thank you to you for putting today's session on and your ongoing commitment and passion for primary authority. So listen, everyone, it's been a really good hour. We will summarise this session in a bit of feedback for you, as well as trying to mop up some of those questions. And we'll also send, I'm sure, some sort of feedback to you for your thoughts, which we would always, of course, appreciate. But for now, thanks to all my co-presenters. Thank you to Caroline, and thank you everybody for your excellent work. Caroline, last comment to you. Well, it's my place to thank you as well for presenting today. Thanks everyone for getting involved. These can be quite dry, but as you said earlier, in a room full or a screen full of fire service colleagues, it's never going to be quiet. So, and I prefer it that way. So thanks very much, and I will pick up a lot of these points, but I'll put my email address in the chat for those of you who don't have it, and please feel free to get in touch if I can support you in any way with PA and fire safety. So thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your week, and I hope to see you on some other sessions later in the week. Bye everyone. Thank you. Thanks Caroline.
Thanks Caroline.
Bye everyone.
Bye Andrew. You staying, Caroline?